Hello again. One of the minor pleasures of my life is watching people grow angry about something which they don't understand. You see this often with those who are, for example, fiercely opposed to genetically modified food. Ask them what they think a gene is, and they become annoyed. They may know nothing about genetics, but they know it shouldn't get mixed up with farming or horticulture. One often comes across this same kind of thing when debating with those who claim to be bitterly against racism. Asking questions about their belief annoys them, and trying to get them to explain what it is they mean by racism sometimes sends them into a fury. From listening to their conversation or reading what they write on the subject, it is obvious that they have jumbled together various disparate ideas and in their minds and melded them together into one wicked entity which they label racism. In this mixed bag, one will find nationalism, patriotism, racial prejudice, xenophobia, and ideas from Victorian science. It's very difficult to discuss any single aspect of their notion of racism because they do not really know what they themselves mean by the word. I thought that it might be helpful to look at two ideas which are often lumped together in this way and see if we can disentangle them. Let me give two examples of statements illustrative of these two things so that we can see the difference. If I say something like, Orientals are cruel and cunning, or black people are no good at chess, then those are racist statements. I'm making a broad, sweeping generalization about an entire ethnic group and hinting that the characteristics of which I'm talking are common to all, or if not most, of that group. If, on the other hand, I say that Yoruba people tend to be noisy and loud, then that is nationalism. I have specified a group of people who share a common language and largely a common culture. The same applies if I were to describe the Japanese as a very clean people, say. Now, the difference between these two ideas, that is to say racism and nationalism, should be immediately apparent. We know that different nationalities often do tend to have different characteristics which are transmitted culturally. For example, the amount of eye contact which is maintained when talking, how close one stands to a stranger, how often one has a shower, the volume of the voice when speaking in public. These are all things which vary between people from different countries because they are passed on by society and family. This is nationalism, observing differences between people from other countries and probably thinking that the way that people conduct themselves in your own country is preferable to the way that other nationalities behave. To give them another example, 50 years ago it was common in Britain for people only to have one bath a week, typically on a Sunday night before the start of the working week. In Scandinavia, though, at that time, daily showers were more common, and the people in Norway and Sweden were slightly contemptuous of the idea of the weekly bath as practiced in this country. They claimed with some justification that their nations were cleaner than the British. Again, this is nationalism, which is about culture and has nothing at all to do with ethnicity or race. The problem is that if one starts mocking a foreigner and making fun of him or shouting at him so he's unhappy about what you're doing, the law which you're likely to fall foul of is described as being racially aggravated offences. The Lords confirmed this in a judgment, to which I give a link in the description to this video. If I shout at a German or Frenchman and I'm abusive because I dislike their nationality or suggest that they go back to their own country, that is classed as a racially aggravated offence. The confusion, you see, between racism and nationalism is very widespread and officially endorsed. I do not say that either bellicose patriotism or racial prejudice are good things. They're not. Both are undesirable. But to confuse them and treat them as facets of the same phenomenon is absurd. It is symptomatic of the fact that very few of those who declare themselves so fervently to be anti-racist actually understand what it is they are opposed to. From time to time in the comments on this channel, I have asked some of my more vociferous critics to explain clearly just what it is they mean by racism. Not one has ever done so, and they treat the very question as though it is some cunning trap. Either they know what they mean by racism, but are refusing to tell other people what racism is, which would be weird, or they honestly do not know themselves what they believe, which would make their opposition to racism a nonsense. What is alarming is that this uncertainty about the meaning of racism and how it differs from things such as nationalism or xenophobia is so common now as to be almost universal. Considering how important racism is thought to be in the modern world, it makes me uneasy to think that those who are most exercised about it tend to be the very ones who least understand what it is.